We're just going to each introduce ourselves. We understand we only have 8 minutes, so we're going to be as succinct as we can. But my name is Serene Thanalk, and I'm the Chief Behavioral Health Officer. I'm an enrolled member at Ihangtuan Lakota Oyate, which is the Yankton Sioux tribe.
Shar Green Maximo, South Dakota Indian Health downtown location, enrolled member of Fort Peck, Assiniboine, and Sioux tribes in Montana.
Samantha Chapman, Communications Director for South Dakota Urban Indian Health.
Okay, so we understand that, as you stated, Rich, that this is a very complex issue, and a part of what we feel really dedicated to as a nonprofit and as Native Indigenous people, and also our allies that work with us, is we cannot just jump to the solution focus. We want to do that, and we have policy recommendations, but we also have to acknowledge and look at how things got to where they are today. We're not here to go into a long history lesson, but we do feel obligated to share how some of the things really transpired to be the way they are today. We do not take for granted that everyone understands how historical and intergenerational trauma and government policy has affected our people today. One of the number one questions that I get in my work is, why are there so many Native people struggling financially, struggling with substance use, struggling with all of these things? It's a very complex answer, and there is not one direct answer, but we have to have the discussions about how historical trauma is what also is happening today through current oppression. I think there attempts to be some sort of cultural amnesia collectively, that if we don't talk about Native people and the struggles that led to where they are today, then we will just try to move on and move forward. And until collectively Natives and non-Natives and other people of color, we all together acknowledge that we have to all be a part of the solution, and not just say, how do we reach down and help you through maybe making a donation? That's a beautiful thing to make a donation, but we also have to be active in our communities. So we do know that from the public health perspective, which is what our clinic is, we have a behavioral health, cultural health, and medical clinic. So those three pillars are within our clinic. And we recognize now that we cannot separate housing from public health issues. If the people that we're working for are struggling with psychosis or struggling with substance use, we can't simply see them for 1 hour a week to create sustainable change if they don't have a place to live, or if they don't have access to health care and those sorts of things. So we're really framing this up as a public health issue because that's the stance that we come from. So I will pass it on now to Shar, who's going to talk a little bit more about her experience of working in the downtown location and how and why we moved. We have a clinic over by the Danny Semford Premier Center, but that's really our home clinic, but we have recognized the need to be where our houseless relatives are, which is downtown. And so I'll have her step in and talk a little bit about some of the things that we're doing there.
All right, so at our downtown location is where we do all of our cultural activities and events. And we also open it up. So like yesterday was really hot, so we publicly announced that we opened it up to our unhoused relatives, and also we provided water for them. And so being down there, we have our tribal flags up, and so we have a lot of people that just stop in on a daily basis or call us and ask us a lot of questions. We get pulled into a lot of different work, or asks for us to be represented at different community events, like Union Gospel Mission. They're doing great stuff down there. So it's nice to be down there because we're so close to our people. I just want to say a couple of things. Homelessness is a racial justice issue. Research shows that Black and Native Americans are disproportionately represented at higher rates, even in our poverty levels. Currently, houseless relatives in Sioux Falls face a confusing network of siloed efforts to address acute needs. The city needs a holistic approach that supports the full spectrum of present and future needs of houseless relatives. A public health perspective considers the big picture and treats beyond acute needs and crises. Also, one thing I wanted to mention was the no panhandling signs and removal of benches downtown send a message of hostility to houseless people, and is not our belief as Native people. We know that it's not enough to give money to local nonprofits, and mutual aid is beneficial. It reinforces stigma and dehumanizes unhoused relatives. Establishing a housing first approach to guide discussions on housing for folks with mental health needs and co-occurring substance use disorders. Housing folks immediately with no rules of preconditions besides a general agreement like a lease. And then also, just representation of people with lived experiences being on the task force. So that would be an ask, you know, whether that be Indigenous people or just people with lived experience that have been houseless.
Thank you. I hope everybody has one of these in front of you. We did print out some information just with some basic information about intergenerational trauma, some statistics on the disproportionate number of houseless, with the disproportionate number of houseless Native people that live in Sioux Falls and some of our policy recommendations. So you'll have that to take with you when we're finished. So I just wanted to thank you for inviting us. This is a first step to inclusion. I hope that you mentioned you'll be moving to a smaller table, and then I hope that when you do, there are Indigenous people and people who have experienced homelessness as part of those discussions. So some of our policy recommendations, anecdotally, we've heard of people who are houseless who are turned away from shelters because they are transgender. We'd ask that the city partner with shelters and service providers to make sure that they're not excluding anybody who might be protected through a constitutionally protected class based off of race, religion, gender identity, or sexual orientation. We'd like you to consider maybe some non-faith-based shelter options, specifically some that might focus on Native people specifically, considering the disproportionate number of houseless Native relatives. We suggest that you implement an annual or semi-annual community needs assessment and partner with our organization or other Native-led organizations to survey the Native population. We'd encourage you to partner with us to create a program similar to one that is currently in Rapid City called Journey On, and they are like a community-based response to address homelessness through collaborative street outreach, case management, and culturally responsive programming. We'd ask that case managers and service providers receive cultural competency training so that they understand the population that they're dealing with. Collect and aggregate quantitative and qualitative data from shelters and service providers to measure disparities and outcomes. Just continue to attempt to include and make space for people who are directly impacted by homelessness.
Great, thank you so much. You can stay right there for a moment and see if task force members have any questions. Anybody have a question? Kurt?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate your presentation and what you do, and I will just speak for myself. I am not as fluent in the situation with the Native Americans as I probably need to be, so I will be following up after this to have a sit down with you. On your recommendations, I specifically would like you to address a little bit more the no panhandling. You've recommended remove the signs. It's the first time I've heard that. Normally, I hear from a lot of downtown residents and a lot of downtown businesses, they don't like panhandling at all. People at the interstate sections, they want panhandling removed from the city. So could you expand on that section right there?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're here today to discuss serving the houseless population, and I understand that it might not be attractive to see panhandlers in the corner downtown, but those signs really are dehumanizing to the houseless population. And those signs don't indicate where people could donate money to. They don't list any organization, and they also do not direct people to any services either. So I don't know who they're really serving other than people who've complained about the houseless population downtown.
Thank you.
Other question?
Thank you. I also appreciate you being here, and I also feel like I think I know a little bit about homelessness in this community, but I know nothing compared to what you folks do, so I appreciate you coming. Two things. One, I'm going to follow up as well. Maybe Kurt and I will sit in with you together. My question, though, specifically is talking more about, I understand the concept of a non-faith-based shelter. Can you talk a little bit, put a little more meat on the bone for that? What would that look like? And maybe part of your answer describes what some of those concerns might be with current shelters. Does that make sense?
So I think what we see, and again, when you are in the majority group of probably in the Midwest being Caucasian and maybe Christian, much of the services are really normal and designed for you. It's not unusual for me to walk into a workplace in the past or also a hospital and see things that didn't reflect or represent anything about who I am. In fact, could be very triggering because those very things were a part of the genocide of our people. And so these are things, racial traumas that I think a lot of people don't experience, and a part of our advocacy is to bring awareness about it. So if we're looking at faith-based organizations, it's not saying they're inherently bad, but if we can expand what we already have and include things that aren't based just in one particular faith, and looking at a place that's inclusive of all of them, and given the disparities for our people, having a place that's very culturally specific for the things that we know are risk factors like substance abuse and mental health, being able to have access to maybe our clinic and other places that can provide those resources, but very culturally specific. I think that we would really start to see some changes, paradigm shifts in how we look at holistic care and how that can actually help our relatives. Because the last thing I'll say about this is our way of life is not a religion. So for us to have only faith-based options, it can be difficult. And again, not seeing ourselves reflected in really any of the services that we have access to.
Good. That's a very good answer. Thank you.
Any other question? One more?
Can you expand a little bit on the Journey On program in Rapid City and what that looks like and what it would be like integrated here?
Yeah, so the chief of police actually is the one who told me about it from Sioux Falls. And so in Rapid City, they're partially funded by the county and city. Only 10% of their funds comes from grant funding, so they're very sustainable. They're on the ground working with the downtown businesses, and when someone is intoxicated, they're the ones going down, so it's not the police officers. Police officers have more serious calls that they need to be at, and so the Journey On is kind of that step in between community and police.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we have a meeting with them on Monday in Rapid City, so.
Thank you. Great job. Quick note on that Journey On program, you'll be hearing much more about that. I actually was there for 2 days and went on visits with them, and the police chief in Sioux Falls will be sharing more about that at our working sessions as well. One more question, Mike?
Actually, this isn't a question. I guess I want to do this right now because you are the first ones to be up there, and any other groups that are here. Although not native, I have personally gone through homelessness. Consequently, I know the trials, the tribulations, the challenges, and so on. So there is someone up here that does actually realize everything that dumps into that particular dump truck.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, one more.
Quick question if I can.
Sorry, we got another one.
So there's 2 locations, is that correct? There's one here in Pierre. How much staff do you have?
We have approximately 50 staff between Pierre, our Sioux Falls clinic, and our Sioux Falls downtown location.
Okay. Are you understaffed? Are you adequately staffed? Are you?
I think we're facing the same nursing shortage that most other healthcare organizations are, but otherwise we're adequately staffed.
Okay, interesting. Well, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. I want to invite up the Helpline Center. I believe they're present. Yes.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Janet Kiddems. I'm the CEO of the Helpline Center. So I just wanted to share a little bit of data with you. The Helpline Center, as you probably know, we answer the 211 phone number, and now we answer the 988 phone number. So every day we talk with folks that are homeless or who are potentially going to become homeless in the future. So out of our call volume, which is about 88,000 phone calls in a year, 20% of those are regarding housing issues. So it's by far and away the #1 need that 211 sees when they were talking with callers. So I compiled some data for 2021 and then what we've seen the first 6 months of 2022. So in 2021, the top 5 housing needs that we heard from our callers. Number 1 was rent payment assistance by far. That represented 66% of the housing phone calls, people requesting rent payment assistance. Second highest need was information on homeless shelters, seeking like a bed at a homeless shelter. That represented 8% of those housing calls. Third was subsidized rental housing information. Just over 4% of our calls were for that. And then number 4 was seeking information about the housing coordinated entry system, which is operated by the state. And then 5th was housing search information. They needed to find a housing location, an apartment, a house, something to rent. So what we've seen so far in 2022 is similar, but there are a few changes and trends that we've seen so far this year. The call volume for housing is about what we saw last year, so that part hasn't changed. What has changed is probably the demand for information on housing search information has moved up. It's now the 4th highest, and it's already, we've had the same number of inquiries so far that we had for the entire last year for housing search information. So what happens when somebody is calling 211 and looking for housing search information, they may have access to low-income housing, a voucher. They may just be seeking to find an apartment at all in Sioux Falls, and it's very difficult to find where those apartment vacancies are located at any moment in time. So what we can do at 211 is we can provide them a list of the apartments that are out there altogether, ones that accept low-income housing or vouchers, but we cannot tell them which ones have openings at this moment in time. There is no centralized list of vacancies, so it just makes the housing search so much more challenging. So that is something that's coming up more and more often on phone calls to the Helpline Center. So in addition to just sharing some data with you like that, I do want to talk about the Helpline Center Network of Care. The Network of Care is a program, it's a collaborative program that the Helpline Center has operated for the past 5 or 6 years. Works with multiple nonprofit agencies here in town. A lot of them serve basic needs, and many of them you'll hear from today, which include Bishop Dudley, St. Francis House, Community Outreach, Furniture Mission, and so on and so forth. So it's a collaborative approach using a software system that they all operate within so that a client only has to have their information entered in once. They don't have to give their information multiple times. And you can also do referrals between those organizations, and you have a bigger picture of what the needs are for that individual or for that family to better meet their needs. So we would just advocate for the continued expansion and formalization of that closed loop referral system. And the only other comment I would make regarding what previously was discussed, talking about the signs that talk about no panhandling, I know in other communities, the 211 phone number is listed on signs very similar to that. We would certainly be open to having that if that's a part of the conversation. And there's also been other communities that have listed 211 as a point of contact, but they've also used QR codes. So people can use their phone to get into a database of resources or agencies or programs that can help individuals that are homeless. So if there's anything we can do to help coordinate that, we would be happy to support that. Other than that, that's the last thing I want to leave you with is the Helpline Center is all about collaboration and supporting all of the nonprofits. So happy to help in any way that we can.
Thank you. Questions, Helpline Center?
Janet, can you kind of give a little bit of history about the network of care and how
Sure.
How it was established and how it's grown and what the benefits are?
Sure. So the Network of Care, conversations about that began probably a decade ago or longer. But the concept is a simple one, that we have a lot of wonderful organizations in Sioux Falls. And if there's a way that we can continue to get them to partner and share information between each other, we can better serve the clients who are in need and get them their services that they need and get them back to a point in place where they're sustainable and giving back to the community. So as technology has evolved, that's really what has allowed the network of care to take place. When we originally launched 6 years ago, there was a software system that we used that allowed the agencies to join with that. We have since upgraded to a different software system just this past year to allow those agencies to have even a better chance to customize what data they're inputting into the system to serve their needs at that nonprofit organization. Each nonprofit organization operates differently, and so we want to make sure we're meeting the needs of that nonprofit organization and then the bigger needs of what is happening within the community. The idea is to be able to identify not only for the client what their needs are, but perhaps unmet needs throughout the whole community, serving the population that is most needed. Does that help? Okay. Mm-hmm.
Michelle?
Can you talk a little bit more about privacy issues with that? And are there agencies that won't be involved because of that? I mean, maybe the ultimate question is, what are the barriers to that system that you've found?
Sure. Over the last 5 or 6 years that we've operated, we've overcome a lot of those barriers. Clients are asked to sign a release of information to have their information included within the system, and it's pretty rare that they do not sign that. I think from the most part, a client's perspective is they really felt like that was already taking place, that these agencies should be talking with each other and sharing information with each other. So we really don't get a lot of pushback from that. And so we've just begun expanding network of care, not only in the Sioux Falls area, but also in the Brookings and the Watertown community. And we've had some amazing conversations up there regarding specifically government entities, because there has been a little bit of a barrier to get government entities involved into the system. However, we've just successfully overcome some of those barriers in working specifically with county government up in Watertown to allow them to participate in sharing information through the network of care. So I believed we have reached what is called the tipping point, and people seeing the bigger need to participate in a joint system to better serve the community and better serve the people.
Sweet, thanks.
We're going to go to Caden, then we'll come back over here.
You said the number one call that was coming in 2021 regarding housing needs was rent assistance. Do you and your staff feel like there are adequate resources that you can direct community members to with rent assistance, or does that need to be expanded?
The rent assistance programs are adequate at this point, primarily because the state of South Dakota has a housing assistance program that's provided through the federal government that happened with the pandemic. So when those dollars wane, there's going to be a bigger burden on our local agencies to provide that rent payment assistance. But at this moment in time, it's adequate.
Mr. Patterson? Andy?
Yeah, Janet, so back to the network of care. Could you paint a picture for us, if we had broad participation among organizations, what might be some of the examples of things we could do better as a community if we had more complete information?
I think it's, when an agency helps an individual that perhaps is homeless, because that's in fact what we're talking about here, understanding which other organizations they've already received care from would help paint a better picture, and just what other organizations do they still need to receive services from. So if they have been referred to a program, as an example, but maybe that connection was never made. For whatever reason, that person didn't show up to receive the services. So let's go back, find that out. What were the barriers? Why was that person not able to receive those services? Was it a transportation issue? Were they not able to get to that organization to receive those services? Whatever the barrier is. But right now, I think people have a tendency to kind of fall through the cracks when a referral is made to another program or service and they're not able to receive that service. We don't know why. And nobody's there to kind of help pick up the pieces some of the times. Not all the times, but some of the times.
Thank you.
Oh, Mike?
Yeah, the question just before the last one, so far as the federal funds are concerned, from the COVID relief bill or whatever you want to call it, are there guardrails on that to keep those funds from being expended elsewhere or to be moved from rental assistance to some other need?
Right. The funds that are offered through the SD CARES program have a lot of guardrails attached to them. There's a lot of requirements that have to be made or met for that person to receive that assistance. So it's pretty specific of the requirements that a person has to meet to receive those dollars.
But the state can't necessarily move them around, or the entities in charge?
No, the state would have to receive approval from the federal government to repurpose those funds, which would be very challenging at this point. Yeah.
Thank you.
Marshall?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for being here, Janet. Nice to see you. Maybe clarify for those who are here today or watching or reading about these meetings. Again, 988 just came out. 211-988. What's the difference? Who calls what for what? So in the homeless, obviously the topic today, which number and what does the other one do if they want to call that?
Yes, so the Helpline Center now offers 2 3-digit phone numbers. 211 has been with us for quite some time. That phone number is not going away. It's still active. So 211 is the number to call for community-based resources. So if you need information on basic needs, housing, food, financial assistance, government programs, 211 is the number to call. 988, just introduced, is a phone number that is set aside specifically for mental health, behavioral health, substance use, and crisis situations. So both are available 24 hours a day. Both are answered by the helpline. The helpline employs 2 separate teams in our call center to answer those calls. So it is a separate set of individuals that answer 988. 988 is answered by mental health professionals. They all have master's degrees in counseling and social work, that type of thing, just a little higher level of expertise with mental health. Thanks.
Any other questions? Terry?
Thank you. Hi, Janet. My question is from a leadership standpoint, vision, and then also like an allyship. I think that when it comes to the 211, it's pretty unanimous that there's a collective satisfaction with what 211 does, like being a hub of information and being able to point people in the right direction. But I often find that when participating in a big issue or a big problem, you know that you need partners and you need community members who do what you don't do. So I'm curious, like from outside of the scope of the Helpline Center, what gaps do you identify that are missing in the care for this issue that you know is number one for your team that they see in housing and houselessness? And so is there something that you've identified that is missing, or maybe something that could use more awareness in raising in the efforts around that part of the care for homelessness and people in housing transitions?
Sure. I think some of the things that we hear on 211 revolve around, we have several programs in Sioux Falls that operate with like case managers or care managers, and that is a tremendous service because to have somebody to walk alongside them as they're going through this journey, it provides a level of support that's needed in many of those situations. So I would say that there is a bigger need for some type of case management, care management system that allows somebody to walk alongside that person in this journey if they're homeless to then become housed, to meet all of their needs, because obviously they come to the table with multiple needs, not just needing housing usually.
Great. Thank you so much. Did you have one? One more.
Hi. Okay, so my question has to do with statistics.
Yes.
So do you have any statistics from like the previous years? Because I know like for 211, it depends on, who's being directed maybe that year to call 211 for services. So like when we had the state funds, it was, or the coordinated entry, they're told to call you. So those numbers for those types of calls are going to go up in those years. But what about the previous years? Is it similar to what you've presented for 2021, or is it different?
It's very similar. And just to clarify with the coordinated entry, the Helpline Center did actually answer that phone line, but it was not 211. It was a 1-800 number. So that is not included in this data for 211. So that was separate. But I would say overall, it does trend very much like this. The rent payment assistance is generally the #1 need for housing.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you. We're going to Just one quick note, we were going to hear from the link. Bill had a family emergency just happened just now. So Bill's unable to be with us. So we're going to move to Southeastern Behavioral Health Care. I believe I saw some of their leaders. Yep, great. Welcome.
Good afternoon. So we provide services to adults that are diagnosed with a severe mental illness and are in fact homeless. And we're able to provide those services through a federal PATH grant. The acronym is Projects for Assistance with Transition from Homelessness. And also with that, we do get a match from the city to provide those services. And that allows us to do outreach in the form of case management. We screen for the mental illness. If they do not have a mental illness, then we find other resources that we're able to refer to. Through the PATH grant, we provide mental health services, which includes psychiatric treatment as well as medication management. We do rehabilitative services to teach people how to live independently once they've come from a situation of homelessness. We refer to substance use disorder treatment, and we do have substance use treatment at our agency. We're accredited to a level 1.0. And then also we do referrals for primary health, job. We also have an employment connection program through our agency that we can refer people internally to. They are under the umbrella of Voc Rehab. And then, of course, ultimately we get people housed. And then two, with the PATH grant, we can refer to housing services as specified in section 522B10, which is any federal housing programs. And then I will also mention that separate from our PATH grant, we also have two other grants that we work with. One is a Shelter Plus Care grant that is specific to adults who are diagnosed with a mental illness to help them get subsidized housing. It's very similar to a Section 8 voucher. But it is one of the unique vouchers that will actually allow us to find housing for registered sex offenders. So if you can go back to, yep. We try to be good partners. We do a lot of work with other agencies. We work with Minnehaha County Human Services, the Sioux Falls Police Department. Roughly 9 months to a year ago, we started doing a program where we were looking at individuals who had been frequent 911 utilizers and identifying who those folks were and having an officer dressed in a soft uniform and a mental health professional following up with those folks to see what it was that they were in need of and try to build rapport with them and help them get necessary services. And then most recently, within the last 6 weeks, we started a co-responder unit where we have a mental health professional riding in a squad car, and they respond to any mental health call that it doesn't necessarily mean that they need to be placed on a mental illness hold. If they're experiencing any sort of a mental health crisis, that unit responds to those individuals. And we're really finding through that unit that the majority of the individuals that we are encountering are homeless. We do outreach hours to the Bishop Dudley, the Union Gospel Mission, the St. Francis House, the Glory House, the Arch, the VOA Veterans Outreach Center, the Downtown Public Library. And then once a month, we tag along with Night Watch, which is a church group that offers a meal downtown. We also do outreach to the Link Community Triage Center. We partner with Journey of Hope. They come with us to Night Watch and provide bags of different hygiene items and needs items for the individuals that we encounter on night watch. We also have a partnership with Sioux Falls Housing. They help us with our Shelter Plus Care grant. And then also we have a partnership with the South Dakota Housing Development Authority. So a snapshot of a day in the life of a homeless outreach worker. We do outreach on the streets to individuals who are experiencing homelessness and assess whether or not they have a mental health issue and attempt to build that rapport and engage and get them in with services. And we're able to do that through our PATH grant. We also follow up with individuals that we have engaged to check in with them, see how they're doing. Are they in a safe place where they're staying? Assess their mental health symptoms and offer different resources, and then of course ultimately get them housed. Annually, our team serves an average of about 325 people. This year I would say that it's closer to 400. So these individuals, as I mentioned, have a mental illness and then also they are homeless. We receive about 500 referrals a year, but things change, people move out of the area, they may not be ready to accept services, so not everyone that is referred does follow through. In fiscal year 2021, we housed 32 people in permanent supported federally subsidized housing. So that's just the different federal grants that are out there. Individuals also have found housing on their own. They have moved out of the area. Sometimes they choose to stay with relatives, or sometimes they're just not ready to give up that lifestyle. We assist with the annual point in time count. We go out annually in January and collaborate with our community partners. We meet with individuals, and there's a survey where we ask questions. If they're a veteran, we get them referred to the VA, and just really try to determine how many individuals we have in the community that are homeless. And then also we're members of the South Dakota State Homeless Consortium, and a member of our team sits on the Policies Advisory Committee. So we just really try to stay connected in with anyone who has any stakeholder that works with homeless individuals, so that we can assist if they are meeting individuals who have that severe mental illness diagnosis, so that we can get them help with psychiatric services. And then two, I would like to mention that we do have transitional housing. We started that about 2 years ago, where anyone who is coming from a situation where they have been homeless and they're diagnosed with a substance use disorder, we have immediate housing that we can offer to them. They have their own private room with a private bathroom that's fully furnished. We provide 3 meals a day, do medication management, educational groups, and just really work with them to relearn those skills so that they can live on their own again. So just because of the nature of when the transition house opened, a lot of the individuals that we're working with are connected in with one of our specialty courts, either drug court, DUI court, veterans court, or mental health court. And then two, we have a SHIP grant, which is a grant that it's very special in the fact that it can help individuals get on their feet and get housed. It'll pay any rent arrears or utility arrears, and it'll get them through until they're able to locate that permanent supported housing. And then if something should happen where once the individual is living in a particular unit that we're using that grant with, if they do any damages, we can reimburse the landlord up to $5,000 for any damages that they may have created during their time in the apartment.
Great.
So,
Thank you.
You're
Questions for Southeastern leadership? Kaden.
You mentioned that you have mental health professionals doing ride-alongs with the police. What is the frequency of that, is one of my questions. Time of day, is it day and night? And then what are the outcomes that come from those calls? Are these individuals being transported to a Vera Behavioral or the Link, or do they have someplace safe to go?
Sure. So right now we're doing a pilot project, and that is a 2-month pilot, and we will be doing that until August 19th. So just trying to really gather that information and see what the need is. We run into a variety of things. There have been situations where the person is ill to the point that they do need to be placed on a mental illness hold, and then we would dispatch the mobile crisis team to come out and work with them. We really try, though, to work with them and offer reassurance and give them resources so that they can remain where they're at. We have individuals that we have referred to other programming, such as the Link or one of the shelters. So just whatever it is that they need, we meet them where they're at and get them connected to those services that are going to help them with that immediate need.
Rebecca?
With some of the housing programs and things you have in place, are there certain requirements or stipulations for those individuals to meet in order to receive assistance?
Sure. So with the SHIP grant, they need to be coming from a situation where they're homeless. And it's really a temporary program to get them on their feet. So we assist them with a couple of months, and then they're expected to be able to self-sustain after that. So we want to put them into an apartment that's going to meet their needs and that they're going to be able to self-sustain on their own once the grant is no longer able to help them. And then with Shelter Plus Care, really, they have to be chronically homeless and they have to have a mental illness. And as I said, they can be a registered sex offender. That is very unique. I don't really know of any other housing programs out there that allow sex offenders to have a voucher.
Do they need to participate in any type of mental health treatment if that's...
They do. Thank you for mentioning that. Yes, they do need to agree to participate in case management services through our agency. And then 2, they need to agree for us to come into their house, at their home at least once a month, just to check in and make sure that they're able to maintain the unit on their own. And, you know, if they're not, of course, then we offer guidance to try to help them.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Annie?
Hi, Kim.
Hi, Annie.
I don't know if you introduced yourself, but.
Oh, hi, I'm Kim Hansen. Sorry.
And Kim, you've worked at, how long have you worked there?
27 years.
Yeah. So tell me about capacity a little bit. The 400 that you mentioned, are those all new referrals?
Not necessarily. We do see some people who have been referred before, and then for whatever reason, if they've left the area and then they come back, they might get re-referred to us, or we might encounter them again. So they're not necessarily unique individuals.
And the homeless outreach team is how many, and how many are on their caseload?
So we have 4 full-time case managers in the homeless outreach program, and their caseloads run roughly 50 people.
Do you feel like that's adequate?
I do, just because the need is so different. Some people are self-motivated and they just need a little bit of encouragement, or you know, a case manager to help them make a phone call or provide a list. And then other people, of course, are much more high need and need much more hands-on. So they really see a variety of need with that.
Terry?
Hello. Hello, Kim.
Hi.
I have 2 questions. One, it has to do with the transitional housing, which I'm really thrilled to hear that option is in place, transitional housing. I'm curious to the availability of that transitional housing. You know, is it already full? Are you waitlisting people already for that opportunity? That's often the case with transitional housing programs. Like they exist, but then they're at capacity pretty quickly, and the wait list can be sometimes years for some of these programs. So I'm just curious if that is the case for that option with your organization. And then the second one has to do with the outreach team. And I really appreciated the team from South Dakota Urban Indian Health lifting up the importance of lived experience in regards to addressing some of these issues. So I'm curious in regards to the criteria of the housing outreach team, you know, are you including people who share in that lived experience? And subsequently, how often is that team and your entire team really being trained on, reintroduced to, and refreshed on trauma-informed approaches?
Great. So with the transition house, we actually have 23 beds. Now, 4 of those are connected with the link. So if somebody goes to the link and they're waiting to get into treatment, they can stay at the transition house until they get their treatment bed. As far as the waiting list goes, individuals can stay at the transition house anywhere from 1 day and up to 2 years. And so we do see movement. Once people are ready, they feel like they're ready to be out on their own again, they move on, and then, you know, we always have another person that's ready to come in. If we do have a waiting list, it's usually very short, just because people do tend to complete their programming and move on. So we really haven't had much of a waiting list. And as far, oh, go ahead.
Is that one location for all 23 beds?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then, I'm sorry, remind me what your second, about peer supports. So right now, we do not have a peer support working with the homeless outreach team. However, we are working with the state to train some of our clients that we have worked with to be peer supports. And with that, they will be helping the staff to go out and meet with individuals and share that lived experience and help to engage these individuals and just, you know, tell them, hey, I've been through the same thing and I have been able to do this and this is where I am now, to, you know, just offer that support.
And then in regards to trauma-informed practices, how often is that team and your team revisiting that prevalent issue that threads through homelessness?
Sure. So we talk about trauma all the time. We have different educational things at our agency that we offer for our staff to come and learn, and just that continuing education piece so that they're aware of what it is to be traumatized and how to be sensitive to that and work with individuals who have endured trauma. So I would say that we have a training at least every other week. And that is a very common topic because we know how important it is.
Great, thank you. Any other, one more?
You mentioned that you house registered sex offenders. Do you also work with individuals that have felonies on their record?
Yes, we do. Yes.
Great question. Michelle?
I continue to follow up on the ride-along question from earlier. You said that it's a pilot program now. So 2 parts to the question. One, how many people are they available in the squad, in every squad car that's out, or what's the structure now? And then if the pilot ends August 19th, what's the plan going forward?
Right. So right now we are Monday through Friday, 8 to 4 is our hours that we're out and about. And yes, it's a mental health professional riding in a squad car, responding to those calls in real time as they're happening. So once the pilot ends on August 19th, we will have a meeting with the police department and go over the statistics that we have kept and that they have kept, and just determine how will this look going forward. It's something that I don't see ever going away, but definitely something that we need to evaluate and talk about what is going to be the best approach, and, you know, what hours is it going to be needed, and how do we look at expanding the team.
One quick follow-up. Who funds it now? What's the grant that's funding that?
So right now, it's not necessarily being funded. The police department is offering an officer. It does help with freeing up other officers so that they can answer other calls. And then Southeastern is giving the mental health professional. So it's really not being run under a grant.
Cool,
It's just
thanks.
in kind.
Go over here to Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Kim, for being here, and thank you for your 27 years of service. That's pretty impressive.
Thank you.
What kind of annual operating budget do you work off of with this? And how much assistance, I should know this, but it's not coming to me. How much assistance do you get from the city annually?
So with the PATH grant, we get roughly $167,000 through the federal grant. And then with the city match, it's roughly $55,000 for a total of $210,000. That does not cover all of our services. So a lot of it is just us offering those in-kind services from our agency.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
You're welcome.
Annie?
Is that the mental health resource officer that goes?
She was a part of developing that programming, but no, she is not the officer that we go out with. Andrew Parrott is the officer who has been identified as a co-responder officer. He is CIT trained. During the school year, he is a school resource officer.
Great. Follow-up?
Yeah, I have a follow-up. So going back to capacity, so you said there are how many homeless outreach workers?
4.
And then how many do you have for like some of this other outreach stuff that you do? Or is it just the 4?
So in the homeless program, we have the 4 staff, but we're a very large agency, so we have a lot of other programming. So for instance, if we have an individual that we've been working with in the homeless program, and then they are housed and stable with their mental health, we would refer them then to our care program. So we have other options as far as case management goes. So it's not just the homeless program, serving everyone. And then 2, if we have an individual who is working with one of our case management programs and they become homeless, the homeless program would just support that case manager and helping them work with that individual rather than referring them back to homeless. So it's really a collaborative effort between all of our programming.
And did you mention how many case managers?
So in care, we have roughly 26 case managers. The impact program has 9.
Thank you so much. I'm sure
You're
we'll have
welcome.
more. There will be more conversation to come. Most certainly. Thank you. Good
All right.
questions.
Thank you for having us.
Great. Thanks for plowing through, everybody. We're an hour and we're learning. It's like a fire hydrant here for a little bit longer still. Let's invite Union Gospel Mission to come forward, and some of their leaders are here to share with us as well.
Hi, you guys. Thank you for having us. Eric Weber with Union Gospel Mission. As we know, the economy is rising, right? Things are happening. People are losing their homes, rents going up. To address homelessness in our community, we need to figure out how we can help felons that are getting out of prison, living in our community, to get housing. That is a problem that we have in Sioux Falls, South Dakota right now. The biggest is we have a lot of partners, a lot of agencies. More people with rents going up 30% to 40% is a problem in Sioux Falls. We have not enough housing for the lower income, for the everyday working person that works at Chocolate John's or Starbucks or something like that. We do not have ways to maintain them at getting them housing and good housing. So my recommendation for you guys as a board, as a team, is to really see what is the city doing to help that problem, the solution. We see hundreds of apartments growing up. Those rents are $1,100 plus. There's tons of them. What are we doing for the low income? Where's that housing at? So I run a homeless shelter. We have 40% of our workers, people that stay with us, they have full-time jobs. It takes a lot to get into a place, and there's not a place available. 30% of them are felons, sex offenders. How do we get them housing? How does that happen in our community? If they can't afford to buy a house, then they won't have a place to live. So that's why we exist. We have a problem right now with housing in Sioux Falls. Anybody agree with that? We're growing, and it's not going to stop. But if it doesn't stop, homelessness is going to grow too as well. We see a lot of people on the streets. How do we help them? Every day we drive by them. They're one of us. They're not just a statistic. They're just not them or they. They're us. A lot of us are one paycheck away or two from homelessness. How do we help those that are in need now? I read an article this morning from 2013, Let's Eradicate Homelessness in 2015 by Sioux Falls. What's the date today? What have we done? Or are we just talking? When you read these articles over and over about how much Sioux Falls wants to eradicate homelessness, and it's now 2022. This article was written in 13 to eradicate homelessness by 15. We missed the mark. Every day we try to help individuals that are suffering from homelessness, mental illness, and addiction. We need your help. We need a collaborative of all the agencies that are working together to do better. How do we do that? And this is what you come up with. I appreciate it, Rich. I appreciate you saying we need to do something more. And how are we going to get there from here? So thank you. This is Ian.
Hello, my name is Ian Grove. I work at the Union Gospel Mission. I was the director of the thrift store and distribution center. I'm now a community health worker. And I think that some of the things that we're doing might be interesting to you because they're solutions to meet that goal in 2015 of eradicating homelessness. We do a lot of stuff. If you want to learn more about the solutions that we have, I say have Eric come back and talk about affordable housing solutions, creating pocket communities. My wife is here. She's with Transformation Consulting. They have whole systems that are less expensive than traditional housing. They provide secure, stable housing for people with ongoing care. We also have vocational programming that we're building. Eric has run the Union Gospel Mission for about 3 years. Is that correct? And in that time, there have been an amazing array of programs that have been started there. We're working with Department of Labor, DHS. We're going to train people how to drive forklifts. We're going to build a commercial kitchen working with Minervas and Mari's and other things like that. We can train people how to recycle clothing using our baler, and we have education programs. And that's just a little bit of what we do, right? We have the spiritual component, of course. We welcome all faiths, all backgrounds. I myself, I am black, I am native, I'm white. I was a felon, I was an addict, you know, and all those things lend to the lived experience that's so important. Our organization is a collective of people who bring lived experience to life. We have community revitalization group that we have. We call it a think tank. We're working with Smithfield and places like Habitat for Humanity. We're using homeless people to go out into the community and rebuild the community, right? These are just some of the things that we're doing. We have solutions. The problem is that really, we can't provide housing. We can do a lot, but the housing thing is an issue. We have the solutions, but our hands are tied. If we can find a way to clear some red tape, get some land, we can really move the ball down to court to get to this 2015 goal by 2023. So I urge you to have Eric come back, have Tamara Grove with Transformation Consulting come back, and look at some plans, some real tangible, practical plans that can move us toward that goal.
Thank you. Questions? Kurt?
Yeah, I have some good, I appreciate all the verbiage, but could you tell us what you do? I mean, what is your mission? How many people are you helping? How many people do you house? Give us some more specifics about what you do.
So we care for the needs of the community with compassion. We bring in homeless. We have about 70 men and about 22 women and 10 kids right now. We serve over 150,000 meals a year. We partnered with Urban Indian, we partnered with Bishop Dudley, St. Francis House. These are a lot of our partners. We work with Department of Labor, trying to get people jobs and give them back to stability. We work with county, we work with state, we work with a array of people to bring stability back to our community. We bring in people that have no place to go. we do all kinds of things.
Could I share some numbers?
Yeah.
So I just crunched some numbers this afternoon. We served, just in our clothing assistance program, which last month we gave away $14,000 of clothing, and that's a lot of clothing. That's hundreds and hundreds of pounds of clothing. We're talking about 50-cent socks and $2 shirts. We serve about 20,000 families there alone, and a lot of them are working poor. The Glory House, the Arch, people who are coming out of Unit C, people are getting out of prison, they come to us and we clothe them, we feed them, we connect them to services. We give out food boxes as well. We have a kitchen, we serve 3 meals a day. We do that 7 days a week, year round. Our chapel is open all year as well. We're continuing to connect and build programs. When I say we're building programs, we're really building tangible programs that are giving people a hand up. We're tired of the handout thing. We're building tools, we're engineering things into our programming to make people succeed.
Heather? Any?
Eric, can you talk a little bit about, in response to what the Urban Indian Health Gals said about non-faith-based shelters?
Absolutely. We're a faith-based shelter, but we serve anybody, right? Our job is not to save anybody. Our job is to love people. And so what we do is if they have a need, we find out how we can give them that need. Chapel at the Union Gospel Mission is not mandatory anymore. It's optional. It is actually an opportunity. So I know we have a record of 40 years of maybe bad behavior, so-called. But we have changed some things over the years because our job is not to save anybody. That's God's job. He's been doing it a long time. Let him do it. But what we do is we love people. And so what we do is, even with a non-faith-based, is that anybody should be able to go anywhere at any time and be available to do that because it's freedom. Right? We're in the United States of America. We have freedom to go, freedom to leave. So we should have that ability to, if it's collaborated with the state or the city or whatever, to have a place for anybody to go at any time. Right now, we're still in a pandemic. They haven't called it off, right? We have a problem right now. If somebody gets COVID, we have one hotel room in this town for, I don't know, 700 to 800 homeless people that get in, in those issues. We are running out of room. I know the Bishop Dudley is at capacity. We still have room, but we have programs too as well. So we have some rules that our number one rule at the mission is nobody gets hurt. That's yourself, our staff, or a guest, or somebody standing next to you. Nobody gets hurt. And if you are causing those kind of issues, you can't be at the mission. We'll send you to the link. We partner with the link. We have opportunities with them. So we do those things in helping people. But to go back to the Urban Indian issue, is Bishop Dudley is the place that they can go. They can come to us. They do, because this is where they come and get their food, their clothes, so they are visiting us. It's a choice to stay with us or a choice not to.
May I add also, just to expand on that, so 60 or 70%, that's our estimate, of the people we serve are First Nations people from many of the 9 reservations in our state. Of course, this area is a hub, so they're coming from all regions, We go out of our way to include indigenous practices and people into our programming. We've invited Native leaders to our institution to do training on how to do a Native outreach. Not necessarily urban Native outreach, but outreach to natives who are coming from rural reservations. So that's something that's built into it. We're also now developing African immigrant outreach at this very moment.
Substance use disorder is a huge issue within the indigent population. Do you require sobriety from people who utilize your services?
We require that you're not stoned, drunk, or high to utilize our services. We'll feed you, but you cannot be under the influence, because if you are, then you're a danger to somebody else. So we ask them, we'll get them to the link, we'll send them to different places to get recovery. So it just depends too. It's just, we don't know who's under the influence at all times, but we can tell the ones that are when they're acting out. So there could be people that we serve all day long that we don't even know they're high, right? It's just behavioral. So if they're a danger to themselves or others, then they can't be with us.
Rebecca?
Can you talk a little bit about the referral process, how long individuals can stay with you? Do they have to reapply every night, or are they given a certain time frame to be able to stay there?
Yes, so we have a 30, 60, 90, 120, 2 years. It doesn't matter. As long as you are actively seeking after your credentials, and getting your driver's license and getting your birth certificate and getting those things that you need to get back on your feet to get to work, then you can stay with us as long as you need to. We have people that have been at the mission for over 2 years now. But they are in a different situation. They're on Social Security, they're a felon, and a sex offender, they can't get housing. So we work with them, they're staying with us, they're not causing any problems. And they're part of the solution instead of the problem. So we do have those time limits. So if you are not doing what you're supposed to do after seeing a case manager, which we have 4 case managers, 3 community health workers, we have Department of Labor, we have VOA, we have people that come in and help us too as well. Achieve your goals. Even with Southeastern, achieve your goals, you can continue to stay with us. So.
Do you have a current wait list at all?
No, we're open.
Okay, thank you.
Terry?
Hi, Eric. Hi, Ian. I think I have a question in here, but it's certainly more of a comment too. And it's in regards to, so it's more of a collective comment. As we look at homelessness and realize that there is a need for housing, affordable housing, so that people who are working can afford the options that are available. But I also, for me, I get activated myself. I get a bit triggered myself. I should say when I was 10 years old, my mother left her abuser, went to a homeless shelter for 90 days, cleaned up, has been clean for 25 years.
Right on, man.
I was a 10-year-old boy in North Omaha at the homeless shelter there for 90 days. And as a kid, not knowing what my mother was carrying in order to keep her head up, to go back and forth to work and to love us the best she could. And so, I share in that reality of what it is to be homeless. I just want to encourage everyone here as well, when we question organizations like the Union Gospel Mission on what do you do? How many people are you helping? There's so many people who ask that question who's never been to the Union Gospel Mission and spent a amount of time where you could walk away knowing what they do, knowing that it really is about the spiritual breakthrough that is necessary to get a person to sustainability and security. It is the cultural competency to deal with the reality of what it is to be Native American or Black or your reality. And then there's also the trauma issue. And so you can have an organization serving 3,000 people, but if they're continuing to cause harm to that population, if they are not addressing the spiritual component, the cultural component, and the trauma component, it's better to have an organization serve one person and do that right than to get lost in how many people are you serving, because the number doesn't matter if you're not actually helping them with the real issues, which is spiritual, culture, and trauma. So maybe it's talking more about how important that is, or if you agree with that statement and sentiment, and a bit about what you all are doing in that spiritual and cultural sense and trauma-informed approaches in your. And I did volunteer there for a while. I've been in those rooms. I commend all of the efforts down there, and so many people with our bleeding hearts have not been down there for an extended period of time. Have lunch, talk, give 90 days.
Thanks, Terry. Let's
Yeah.
give them an opportunity to talk for a moment, and then we'll close up.
As we serve people in our community, making a difference in one person's life is big. We have put over 33 people back into society, running strong and doing well, and we haven't left them. So what we do is we have an outreach where we go back and we talk with them for the next 18 months. So we have a rhythm, and our rhythm is, of course, we have a spiritual aspect of it, but we want to plug people in to give them support and have a support team behind them. With our community partners, we can all do this together, and we do it together, which is amazing. And the Union Gospel Mission used to sit as an island. Carrie can vouch for that. Some of you guys know that the Union Gospel Mission was all by itself and did its own thing. I don't need to be the whole wheel. We're just a slice, a spoke of it. There's all of us in collective that can work with the people that are homeless in our community, or going to be homeless, or surfing couches, or coming out of incarceration and have nowhere to go. All of us can be part of the solution, and that's what this team is for. So my heart is that let's start doing something quickly. Let's get to that 2015 goal next year.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep,
Thank you for your time. Thank you for the questions. I want to invite forward St. Francis House and continue our learning and understanding.
Good afternoon. When I saw 8 minutes, I went, oh my gosh, you guys have to be joking. Most of you know me. I can't do this in 8 minutes. But so what I did do is the folders I'm handing out, there's a PowerPoint presentation in there about the St. Francis House, our statistics from the last year, some photos of the new building, and some of the new services that we are doing. I also put in there the guidelines for someone to come to the St. Francis House. We do have some restrictions. But inside, I guess I looked at the email a little bit differently. I wanted to take the active approach on the policies of the 4 items. So first of all, I'm a kind of charge person, let's go. So I think we need to develop and implement the partnership between the shelters and the transitional housing programs to create a new strategy on providing housing the homeless in our community. And I share this when Bishop Dudley was a thought, and before it came into implementation, I was asked by the city council to no longer provide emergency housing because we had the Bishop Dudley and we had the Union Gospel Mission. So we moved to transitional housing.
Pause just 1 second, Julie.
Yeah.
I'd encourage everybody to open up your folder.
It's in there.
Sheet's just handed out. She's working off of the 4 points right here. Thanks. Sorry.
No problem. And so when we did that, that's when we kind of opened our doors and we started working more with the South Dakota Department of Corrections, housing individuals that have felonies, as well as working with the specialty courts, drug court, mental health court, VA court. And we started helping people. And I think what we need to do is tag on what Janet was talking about, because we were one of the first partner agencies with the network to do this, and it's an amazing program. We could sit and talk about it all day. But I think we need to kick this into action that we have, if someone calls 211 and needs a bed, then it's gonna say, well, Bishop Dudley is full, the mission has this, and maybe this is where the St. Francis House, we have to start looking and changing some of our operations. With our new building, maybe we need to have, 4 or 6 rooms that are just for emergency housing for people to be able to come in. So that's kind of my issues to addressing number 1. Number 2, I am a firm believer that we have to sit down and talk with the people and find out what is going on. We were blessed, and we did that before we built our new building. We did a focus group with our guests and asked them what did they want. And if you've been in our new building, Julie Becker did not design that building. It was everything the guests asked for. And if you're not familiar right now, the MacArthur Foundation is working on equity for the judicially impacted individuals, that we received a very large grant for this community. I think it's over $3 million. And so once again, that group came to the St. Francis House and did surveys with our guests to get a focus group to hear what their struggles have been, what do they want to see, and what do they not want to see. Because we can do all this work, but if they don't have a buy-in and they don't see it's beneficial, we're just landed on our faces again. We have to sit down. So whether it's an officer and a mental health counselor, let's go to the park and let's talk to people. Let's ask them what is happening. I have an individual that has been sleeping in the park who is now at the St. Francis House. He is sober for the first time in a long time, working full-time, and for the first time his parents know where he's at. That's a gift. So those are some of the things that I think we need to look at. We need to gather some additional information. How do we adapt? Does the St. Francis House need to have outreach case manager that goes down to the Union Gospel Mission and Bishop Dudley to say who would like to come to the St. Francis House, so that we are freeing up those beds and showing that partnership? We all have plates that are full. We're all short on staff. But I think we have to start looking at things differently, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to survive in this community. Number 3, housing families has always been difficult. You know, all the statistics will say don't house them in shelters. One of the things I think we need to look at is seeking out some landlords that are having struggles with keeping places in good condition and not having squatters. So I'm going to use an example. I don't know if you guys know Jason Andera. He's a Midco sports announcer. He had a duplex on our block that, oh my gosh, squatters all the time. The neighbors were complaining. Our guests were having issues because they're constantly getting propositioned for alcohol and drugs. So Jason asked me if I wanted to buy it. Of course, I was building a building. I didn't have time to buy another property. So what we did is we said, well, let us take it over the management of it. And so what we have done is that is now a master lease, where guests that graduate from the St. Francis House can now move into that, and they have safe, affordable housing. And these are individuals that kind of all keep themselves accountable because they want to maintain that sobriety. We've also done this with another complex in our neighborhood, Val Pearson. I don't know if you know her from First Lutheran Church. She had a 3-unit complex, kind of corner from our quad, if people are familiar with our properties. Once again, we have 3 units that we have turned into master leases. We guarantee her that the rent is paid, but only graduates of the St. Francis House are able to live in those programs. I have said many times, there are other apartments in our neighborhood that I think we can revitalize and work with those landlords and create these programs, and then we have to have the case management. And so I'm all about wanting to be part of the solution. If St. Francis House needs to look at things different, I'm at the table. My message to the City Council a long time ago, some of you got my nice messages in my emails. I just want to end with, we can do better. This is not how we want Sioux Falls to be. We need to do better. So I talked really, really fast because I knew some people would have questions.
Questions? Andy?
Julie, thank you for all that. You mentioned the city asking you to kind of move to a transitional role. Would you say maybe since that time, do we have more assets in the transitional phase and less adequate at the emergency shelter? Am I reading between the lines with what you're talking about, making some rooms freed up?
Well, in my opinion, and of course Eric and Madeline are going to be, they're in that world a little bit differently than I am. But what I can tell you is that we have been inundated with individuals coming to our community. You know, and that was partly due to the pandemic. Yep. You know, we were wide open, come to our state, we have jobs. And so that drew people here, but they didn't have the housing component because, let's face facts, we were behind the housing program about 5-10 years ago. So I think that what we need to do is we just need to do a collaborative effort of trying to get people in. Now, not everybody wants to come to the St. Francis House. We have rules. You have to work, you have to be sober. Not everybody wants to do that. But those that do, let's start moving and working together and showing complete partnerships where there's no end to one arm. It's a handoff. And I think those are the works that we need to be doing.
Good. Thank you.
Michelle.
Thanks, Julie. This is always good, and I appreciate you talking fast, but I kept up. So you just got me thinking now, and I see Eric nodding back there as you're talking, and you're going handoff. If we change nothing except to create those partnerships, do we have adequate services in this community right now?
You know, that's a tough one because I don't want to be the Debbie Downer, but I don't know if we ever will. You know, and the reason I say that is we're blessed to be in our new building, and now that we do, and you can see in the PowerPoint, I mean, we're doing stuff that we didn't do before. Southeastern comes in twice a week. We have volunteer nurses coming in twice a week to reduce people going to the ER. We have spirituality components for the whole scope for everybody who comes because we're ecumenical. We've just started a partnership with Southeast Tech to help people get their GEDs. There's always going to be those gaps. but we've got to be a step ahead of it and always instead of 5 miles behind. So, I mean, this is, I think, some approaches that we can do. But I kind of like the idea when you're talking about a non-spiritual, because even though St. Francis House is St. Francis House, we are ecumenical. And so, but some people still have that image, St. Francis House, it's Catholic, you know, you're going to push religion, which we don't. There's misconceptions that are always going to be there. Did that answer your
Okay,
question?
yes, it did. It answered my question. And I just want us to hear that very clearly as a community, that this is a forever thing, but that we can chink away at it. And that one of the great first steps is probably partnerships.
You know, and this is going to, I'm recorded and people are going to hear this. I don't know if we're ever going to end homelessness. Let's face facts. I think we have to get that out of the picture. Okay, I've been in this community, I'm just going to say for almost 30 plus years, okay? But what I think we need to be focusing on is let's be proactive instead of always being 5 miles behind the problem. You know, let's work together. If someone's having an issue with an agency, then let's come together and let's talk about it. Let's partner. The silo thing, I can't do. I mean, I'm all about sharing and everybody working together because that's how we're all going to be better. You know, we were talking about, I have a guest staying at the St. Francis House that works at Bishop Dudley. I have an employee that lives at the Arch. You know, this is the stuff that needs to be celebrated, is that we are all coming together and rising people up.
Amen. Thanks.
Question, Terry?
Yeah. Hi, Julie.
Hey.
I just want to start by thanking you for your service and, you know, your longstanding service. There's a St. Francis House in Omaha, too, and does an amazing work there as well. My question is, as you speak to collaboration and partnerships, I think it's, again, another one of those unanimous perceptions is like we're a small, big city.
Mm-hmm.
We're not very big, right? I mean, and I think
everybody knows everybody.
Yeah, and when you hear about the issues of homelessness, you often hear about that corridor of services between the Bishop Dudley, the St. Francis House, the banquet. And I guess I'm curious if you have identified what has prevented the partnerships, the continuity of services, the handoff, seeing how we're so close in proximity. Do you have an idea of what inhibits or what are the hurdles between the organizations actually being truly collaborative?
Well, first, I don't think it's ever intentional. I think it's just that our plates, the platters, are full, and stuff starts falling off the platter, and you can't be a part of that. I'm going to go back to, I know the Helpline Center does some stuff, but the Homeless Coalition, you know, that was a time where we all came together and we all shared, so we stopped trying to duplicate services. And I will commend Eric. I mean, there were years that we did not have a relationship. I remember a meeting when Mayor Huther called all of us directors, and the director of the Union Gas Commission, he just didn't show up. Because, I mean, I'm sorry, if the mayor's calling, I'm coming. But that's not the case now. It's a quick text, it's a phone call. If someone needs something, it's about sharing. And the unfortunate part is, we all know there's only so many hours in the day, there's only so many staff that we can hire. For me, it's not necessarily, I mean, I just need people who are going to come to work every day and want to do this work. That's not always the case, you know.
Thank you, Julie.
Yep. Any other questions?
Appreciate your
Thank you.
experience.
Yep.
Next, we're going to hear from the Bishop Dudley Hospitality House.
Hello, I'm Madeline Shields. I'm the director of the Bishop Dudley House. Just to give you a little bit of background, and I also dropped off a packet at the beginning, and I did the same thing as Julie did. I went through the questions and answered and tried to come up with policies that would help us. But first off, I want to do a little bit of background of what the Bishop Dudley House is. We're an temporary emergency homeless shelter. We opened in 2015. We have 80 beds for men and 20 beds for women, and it's congregate living. So we have those 80 beds are in one room. And then the 20 beds in the women's area is in one room. And we have 7 family rooms that are in a secure location of our building. under lock and key that only the families have access to, and those are typically always full. Our shelter is a day shelter and it's an overnight shelter. And so we have day hours. There's some misconception that we're closed during the day. I hear that a lot. We are not closed during the day. We are open from 8 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. We serve lunch every day. We have access to lunch, showers, restroom facilities, laundry facilities for free. Computers in the women's day room and in the men's day rooms that all the guests have access to, and telephones, and then we have case management as well for all of those guests who are staying there. We do close from 5:30 until 6:30 p.m. so that we can reset for our check-in time, and that's when the banquet is open, so we collaborate with the banquet. They serve breakfast and dinner, and we serve lunch. So we're closed between 5:30 and 6:30, and then at 6:30, our guests can come right back and they can check in for overnight. And in the evening, once a guest has checked in, we do it electronically. We have a system called Airtable with the Helpline Center created that for us. And as you see in your packets, they make fabulous graphs. It keeps track of all of our statistics for us. When they check in, they cannot leave for the night. We have resources. We provide office space for outside resources to come into the Bishop Dudley House. So we collaborate with lots of different agencies to come in. We have Minnehaha County social workers that come. We have representatives from the Falls Community Health. We have the Avera ER nurses. We have the Sanford nurse practitioners that come. We have medical residents and a doctor that come from the Coyote Clinic, and they provide, they meet with our guests if they have medical issues, and then they refer them back to the Coyote Clinic for treatment and for follow-up. They will also refer people to the Falls Community Health to get medical treatment as well. We have addiction counseling that comes in. We have veterans outreach, mental health resources through Southeastern Behavioral Health, and we have people that come in and talk with our guests about Medicaid and Medicare. We have mentors that come in and work with our guests, and we have spiritual guidance that also helps our guests. So what I did is I went through the questions as Julie did as well. And so the first question, the policy recommendations that guide future city involvement for the shelters and the capacity needs, that is our biggest challenge. Bishop Dudley House has 100 beds for individuals, and we are over capacity every single night. In the wintertime, we are massively over capacity, as many as 80 to 90 extra people per night. And that is very difficult for our staff to handle. We sometimes will have between 60 and 80 people sleeping on a mat on the floor during cold weather emergency shelter. And that is our biggest challenge. It's hard to hire people to work in a homeless shelter. They love it at first, and then reality sets in. It's very challenging to continue to work with a vulnerable population every single day of the week. So our board of directors had very, very concerned about our capacity levels. And so we went to the fire marshal and said, we need to have a walkthrough, and we need to know exactly what is our maximum capacity in our building for overnight guests. And they came back with 155 people. So we're still 55% over capacity, but it's manageable. And my biggest concern is what is going to happen this winter when it's 10 below or 10 above or it's inclement weather. Where are we going to refer those 10, 20, 40, 50 people who are going to be number 156? We need to have some kind of guaranteed referral system, because my staff cannot turn people away. Because for many in the winter, that's a death sentence. And so we need to figure out how to come up with a referral system that we can call, and it's going to be after hours, is what do we do when we hit that 155 maximum capacity? That's going to be one of the biggest challenges, and the clock is ticking. I think cold weather emergency shelter meetings begin soon, and we declare our cold weather emergency shelter October 1st to April 30th. And that's when we have always let everyone in who walks through our doors. But with the fire marshal's report, we are not going to be able to do that starting this winter. We have lots of reasons why people cannot stay at the Bishop Dudley House. We take everyone that we possibly can, and we do allow people in who are under the influence. It makes it very challenging. However, they have to behave themselves. They have to, not be a danger to themselves or be a danger to the staff or the other guests, and they can stay. A lot of times people are under the influence. They just want to come in, they go to sleep. But then we do have people who are violent. They're dangerous to the other guests, they're dangerous to themselves, they're dangerous to our staff, and they cannot stay. So we usually either call the police, we send them to the link. But there are other reasons why people cannot stay. They have to be able to self-care. Our staff are not healthcare providers. They can't do lift assistance. They cannot help people with showers. If people cannot get to the banquet, which is across the street, to eat, then they should not be staying with us because they're going to be going without food. And so we do have a policy that you have to self-care. You have to be able to get yourself in the shower, out of the shower, in the bed, out of the bed, and be able to leave during meal times at the banquet. So that was the first question. The second is recommendations for policies that strategies on how to engage the homeless individuals on the street. And once again, that is housing first. We need to come up with somewhere that will take people who are chronically homeless, chronically addicted to alcohol or drugs, justice-involved individuals who are felons and sex offenders. We have had people stay at our facility for 568 nights consecutive. I have people there who've been there 300, 400 nights, 500 nights. They are chronically homeless, and they basically live at the Bishop Dudley House because there is nowhere else for them to go. They have no income. They have no family. They have nowhere to go. And if we were just to send them out, they would become a victim of others, or in inclement weather, they would freeze to death. And so it's not an ideal situation, but we do have people who have been with us since I started there 3 years ago. What we would like to see is more efficiency apartments, because these people don't need a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom apartment. What they need is a small efficiency apartment that will get them housed and get them off the street. That's going to be a much better solution. It keeps them out of the emergency room. It will cut down on visits to the link. It will cut down on police calls. If we can get some kind of a housing unit that is more like the safe home, and I talk about that in a little bit, we need to give law enforcement more authority to be able to move people along who are loitering on neighboring property to the shelter or on the shelter property. That is a huge challenge for us. We want to be good citizens. We want to be good neighbors in our neighborhood. However, we have a challenge that people have free will. We cannot forget that just because we have day shelter hours and we're serving lunch and we have coffee and we have snacks and they can take showers, that they want to come in to the Bishop Dudley House. They want to stand out on the streets, or they want to go out to the park, or they want to sit out on the sidewalk. They have free will, and we cannot force them into our building. And so we need to come up with a better solution. as to where people can sit, where they can be outdoors when they want to be outdoors, and not be loitering on neighbors' property, on our property. We just don't have a good system right now on the ability to move people to another place. And it's challenging because we have a lot of neighbors that are doing business in our neighborhood. And we do want to be good citizens.
I'm gonna have to stop you there and kind of move to the question portion, so we can kind of be respectful of everybody's time. I know there's gonna be a lot of questions.
Sure.
So thank you for sharing this with us in writing. A lot of good material. Let's move into questions with Madeline, and who wants to get us started? Kurt.
Thank you, Madeline. You touched on something that has been brought to our attention at the city council level, and nobody's come up with a solution for the, I will say, the very cold nights when people come and seek shelter that normally don't, and you're overcrowded, and an emergency shelter. How would you envision something like that working?
To find another place for them?
Correct.
Well, I would like to see somehow maybe a referral through the Helpline Center that goes to Minnehaha County. We have to remember these are citizens of Sioux Falls. These are citizens of Minnehaha County. We are a nonprofit private charity, and we cannot be responsible for everyone. I don't have the solution. I can tell you that, Kurt. I don't know what the answer is. But come October, there are going to be 40 people looking for a place to sleep that, according to the fire marshal, I'm not going to be able to let into my doors. It's a big problem.
Agreed.
Annie?
Okay, I have a question. So, and maybe I missed it, but I didn't hear either Eric or you say that you collaborated with each other.
We do. We do collaborate. Did he leave? Okay.
You're on your own. What does that look like?
Sure. Well, our guests eat at the Union Gospel Mission as well. His guests come over, maybe use the telephone or our day services. Yeah, we collaborate. When it rains, Eric shows up with ponchos because he got a massive donation of ponchos. When we get a huge food donation, we call and say, hey, can you use this? You know, we don't publicize that all the time, but of course we share. We're neighbors. We're right next door to each other.
What about when you're over capacity? What does that look like for, like, would he take, I guess he's not here, so
Yeah, I can't speak for Eric. And you know what? He has his mission and we have our mission. We have to remember that, you know, we're serving our population, which is different than his population. They maybe don't have the staffing that can accommodate people who have been under the influence, and we do, and our staff has been trained, and we also hire outside security at a hefty price tag.
Other questions? Mike?
I know that later on in our discussions that the subject of loitering is going to be coming up. To be very honest with you, I live about 2-3 blocks away from St. Francis House, and I run down 8th Street every day. And I guess one of my questions would be, has anyone ever thought, you say you have some day programs and so on, has anyone ever thought about anything that could be done around that particular area where all of you folks are located, or most of you are, for activities that could, a place that would have decent activities for people to have during the daytime in that area?
Well, we have day rooms and we do have activities. I mean, we have resources in our building. We have, for people who are unable to work or are chronically homeless and chronically addicted, you know, we have things for them to do inside. We have a volunteer and activities coordinator who is there, who can, they help us in the kitchen. They clean our facility. Our guests do much of the work around the shelter. We don't have a custodian on staff. It's a huge facility. And so our guests are very engaged in the programming that happens at Bishop Dudley House. They do all of the laundry. So we have, 150 to 200 people staying overnight. That's a lot of sheets to wash every single day. And so there are things going on. People have free will and they don't want to come in. Just like we can't make people from our community to come in.
And I appreciate the fact concerning the amount of work that it takes and is involved. My thought is that rather than having people loiter around, is there some way that maybe they would have like volleyball or horseshoe pits or something like that that they could utilize during the summer and so on, and get slightly away or even be fully involved in something conducive rather than just simply sitting in place, if you will?
Thank you.
Yeah, we actually have chess tournaments. We have not horseshoe, but the beanbag toss tournaments and games. Yeah, we have all of that. Again, we can't force them to come in if they don't want to come in.
Thank you. Marshall?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Madeline. So 80 to 90% over capacity during the winter, and it's running over capacity every night. Like tonight, you have 80 beds, and you'll have.
Yeah, if you look in your packet, these are the statistics by month, and they're January through July right now, and it tells you how many people we have, their age, everything.
Okay. Has this facility always been the same size as it seems to me? It was added to not that long ago, or has it always been the same amount, 80 since 2015, 80 beds?
Always been the same.
Okay.
We have not added on. We're landlocked. And I don't know that adding on is a solution.
Yeah. I mean, you'd have to add on quite a bit, the way you're talking too, just for it's not, I don't know, just asking questions out loud as you're talking. And then security is the other thing that came to mind when you talked about this, because especially if you're talking about having a place that's bursting at the seams and a number of them probably intoxicated. I mean, do you have, and I think you just said it, you've got some pretty hefty security bills and that type of thing. Do you have somebody around at all time, kind of on call in that route too?
We do not. Our staff takes care of during the day. You know, our guests are people, and we know the majority of them. We love them. They are citizens, and they've been around for a long time. And so we have a really good rapport with people. If somebody knows that they've misbehaved and they need to go, then let's walk around the block. Come back in a half hour when you can shape up. And we have that rapport with our guests. However, at evening time is when we have security from 6 p.m. till 10 p.m. when it is check-in, because there are a lot of people coming in who've been working all day that we don't know during the day. They're not around during the day. And so these are more newer guests, and we don't know everyone. And that's when more unpredictability happens, is in the evening hours during check-in. People don't like you going through their bags, so they get upset. People don't like that they can't bring food in. They can't bring, any weapons in. And so there's a very precise protocol on, coming into our building in the evenings.
Right. Thank you. We're going to have to move to our next presentation just to be fair to all the agencies. Give everybody the same amount of time for questions, and thank you so much. Thank you for the information. Final agency today, the banquet. Banquet would come forward and share with us.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having us. I'm Tamara. I am the director of the banquet. And our role here today is maybe just a little bit different than maybe the couple of the last presentations. We are obviously a feeding ministry in our community. We serve 16 meals a week between our two locations. We averaged last year 175,000 meals served. All of those meals were prepared by, paid for, and served by volunteer groups. So unlike most of the people presenting today, the banquet is a nonprofit that is helping the homeless population, but we are doing it 100% through volunteer power. So of that 170,000 meals that we served in 2021, 15,000 of those were served to 12 and younger. I went through those 4 questions as well. And the one thing I thought about was in 2020, at the beginning of, it was basically the beginning of COVID, Jeff Schmidt and some others from the city, they reached out to us and we had 2 meetings. They were Zoom meetings, but it was the 8th Street Corridor committee or whatever they were calling it, but it was the city that was kind of spearheading it. But we had business owners and then the Madeline and we were in on that call too, and it kind of just went away. But those business owners that were part of it, they were really starting to buy in. They had really good suggestions, and I just thought if we could get that going, and even at a better rate, then, you know, if we can get that whole neighborhood working together, maybe that 8th and Indiana corner won't be such a problem if we're all working together to make it better. So that was one idea that I had. And one other thought that I had was on that last objective that you guys have identified, was to increase the availability of housing. We have opened our West Side location 2 years ago, and we had a hard time getting buy-in in that community. It was a community of people, a neighborhood that wasn't familiar with the banquet, and they were leery about coming in. Out there, we are not serving a homeless population, and I'm bringing this up because of that low-income, affordable housing component. They are folks, especially right now with the economy, they are struggling to hang on. They are scrapping to pay their rent. So that's why our numbers out there are growing out in that Hayward neighborhood, because those folks are now realizing that the banquet can provide a much more nutritious food than they can afford with the grocery prices that are out there right now. And so I would just like you guys to keep that in mind, that at this rate, if we do not really focus on getting more affordable housing, we could have a lot more families in a homeless situation going forward. So that's my brief way in here. Obviously, I've worked very closely with the Bishop Dudley House since it began, and I want to continue that partnership because I think together with the rest of the neighborhood, we can really make things really much, much better.
Thank you. Questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Fabulous. Well, that was a fire hydrant of a bundle of good information and expertise. We're really appreciative of each agency, each organization that came and presented today. And I think task force members, as you reflect on all this information, one thing to keep in mind is as we move into working sessions, if you're thinking about a specific goal and you look back at this and you're like, hey, I'd really like Madeline to be at that meeting, or like Eric to be at that meeting, or Julie, you just let Jim or I know as we get prepared for those work sessions. We'll be inviting these agencies back in to be part of the conversation. The goal is not to now go hide in a corner somewhere, but it's to continue the open conversation as well. So just keep that in mind, that we'll be inviting people back into that conversation and so forth. So thank you, agencies and organizations, for your leadership and being here today and helping us understand and learn more along the way. Our final agenda item today is an opportunity for public input. We will now allow for the public to share their perspective and idea. Each person sharing has 3 minutes to share. If task force members have questions, you can ask those questions after the meeting to the individual specifically. We will not be allowing back and forth between the task force and members of the public. So today, members of the public have 3 minutes to share their perspective and ideas. Invite members of the public to come forward at this time. Ask that you state your name, please, and share.
Can I have that screen, please? Can I have?
Jim's gonna
Okay, thank
help
you.
help you here.
I wrote this out, so I could follow. Oh, you're gonna have to. Yeah. you can move it up as you go. Okay. My name is Linda Oliver, and I live here in Sioux Falls. I heard that you guys were going to do this thing, and I was like, I have to be there. The homeless needs to be treated with dignity and respect at all times, no matter what their situation is. God has a blueprint for how to treat the homeless and how to heal the homeless and the sick and the addictive. He says to call on the elders of the church to come anoint and pray for these people to bring healing, because that's what Christ did. All of these programs are not going to help unless you put God first, and He has to be the leader. You can't lead and expect people to be healed and stay clean if they have no spiritual guidance, because God is the healer. Jesus is the healer. No program can heal you. I know this for myself. I was addicted to alcohol from a child up until my 30s, and I quit in 93 because it was the Lord who saved me. I cried out every day to be saved, but I couldn't do it without Him. Without Him, I could not do it. And He knows you can't do it without Him. And if you don't put Him first and make Him the leader, you'll never have these people free from their addictions and their homelessness. So when I hear people say, we don't want to be spiritual about it, we don't want to preach this to them, and we don't want to, that's what God wants you to do. That's what you need to do, because He's the healer, not you, not your programs, not your money. And He doesn't want you to plunder the homeless. He wants you to give them a hand up. He wants you to open your hands wide to them. It's in Scripture. Open your hands wide and quit raising rents. If you want to know how to do this, quit raising rents. Quit raising food prices. Quit raising gas prices. Quit raising things on people. People cannot keep up if you keep raising prices on everything. That's what's making people homeless. That's what's giving people feel like they have no hope. And a lot of these people are dealing with sexual abuse, past. That was my thing. That's what had me drinking. From a child I'm sorry, am I out of time? Can I say some more?
You can finish. You got about 30 seconds.
And I was addicted to alcohol because I was abused by family members. As an adult, I grew up and I was promiscuous because I was always drunk. I was abused and raped. I was almost murdered several times. But yet God kept me through it because I prayed every day that He would free me, because I know it's a sin to die in drunkenness. It is a sin. And people need to know that their addictions and the things that they're dealing with is sinful to God. And He wants to heal you, but He can't heal you unless you guys bring Him into this.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your willingness to come forward. Anybody else wish to address the task force?
Does this little timer work? Okay. Hi, my name is Dr. Tamara Grove. I've been in Sioux Falls since 1992. And I just wanted to say that I have a solution, and I've had a solution for several years now. The solution is tiny homes. Not that Jesus isn't the solution, because I agree with her. So mine is second to what she just said about. So tiny homes offers an opportunity for people who, well, at least what I was going to build, $15 an hour or more. It offers them an opportunity to own their own home. So this is South Dakota. We have land, and we own our homes here. In 1999, I was in a shelter with two little children. My daughter was 3 and my son was 2. And I didn't know what I was going to do. It was an insane time in my life, and didn't think that I would ever be in a shelter. When I got out, I had help. I didn't have handouts. I had help up. And I had a home before I went into the shelter. I came back to my home.
and I've stayed there. I am still there. So I just want to say that when people have a hand up and they have, you know, a community that surrounds them, they can make it, because I have. So I just want to say that one of the solutions is the tiny home pocket communities, where it's like 400 square feet. And as what the lady from the Dudley house spoke of, it basically is an efficiency. But as a person who was coming on the shelter with myself and 2 little children, it would have been perfect. And so just as a solution to think about. Thanks for what you're doing. It's needed.
Thank you. Thank you for your willingness to share. Other members of the public that would like to share?
Hi, I'm Pastor Jason Muller, and I had one comment, and then I want to carry off of what the doctor shared. I'm part of a mission group that goes down to Juarez, Mexico, where we build tiny homes. And it's a ministry that we do called Casa por Cristo. The idea of what happens down there and what happens to these communities where they get a place where they can live and be part of that community. The only reason why we can't do that here, in my opinion, is because of the way the infrastructure is set up. We have rules and regulations on how big a house needs to be or how small. And if we can make some effective changes there, I do believe that we can eliminate some of our homelessness by helping what I've heard from each and every one of our ministry groups to help somebody take another step forward and getting closer to owning their own home. My comment about our community is so many of these organizations were started by churches, and they've grown and grown and grown. And can you imagine what our city would be like right now if we did not have these facilities? We would miss the Union Gospel Mission. We would miss the Bishop Dudley, the Banquet, the St. Francis House. These organizations have carried an incredible burden for years and years and years because of faithful people in our community. And I'm excited that you guys are having this conversation, and I want to encourage it. But I'm really with the doctor on this idea that what would it be like if we could help people get into a tiny home to have self-worth and value and to feel like they're part of the community. And my side note, and I'm watching my time here, is I grew up in New Jersey, not very far from the ghettos. And I grew up very poor. If it wasn't for my family and the community around us, we probably would have ended up living there. The one thing I hope is that we don't set up a housing structure where 40, 50, 60 apartments are bulked together, where people won't have community and people would be preyed upon, as well as what's happened in those other communities. It's failed. I don't think we're proposing that, but I just wanted to put out that as a caution. And thanks for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to address the task force this evening? All right, seeing no other members of the public that wish to address the task force, I want to thank members of the public for being here today. Those who have watched, thank you. Agencies and organizations, thank you for being here as well today. I know it's a big commitment to give that amount of time out of your day. Our next meeting will be on Monday, August 8th at 7 p.m. here in Carnegie Town Hall. So Monday night, we'll meet here at 7 o'clock. Monday night's agenda is very simple. It's public input. Opportunities for members of the public to come and share their perspective and their ideas. We could be here for 5 minutes. We may be here for 4 hours. We do not know, but it's an opportunity for people to share their perspective. So I encourage you to be here Monday night at 7 o'clock. Task force members, if you need further information, follow-up questions, you can contact Jim David from our city. Jim, you just stand up and make sure that everybody's aware of who you are. Jim on our city council staff is going to be providing a great resource for us. There's also a spot on the Sioux Falls website that's been built, siouxfalls.org/homeless. siouxfalls.org/homeless. That's where we'll post this meeting, the meeting on Monday night, and any other resources that we share. So, task force members, thank you for your time and your commitment. Look forward to our time together in the months ahead. We are finished. Thank you.
So the work sessions will not be recorded?